So, talking about Hardy-Weinberg, what we're doing with this math is you are able to tell, you know how in, like, you remember the term discrete trait? It's either something you have or you don't. With discrete traits, you can use this formula that we're going to talk about, and you can tell how many people in the population have or are homozygous recessive, how many people are homozygous dominant, and how many people are heterozygous, just by figuring out one of the things. And I'll show you how it's going to, just by figuring out how many people are homozygous recessive. If you can figure that out, you can figure everything else out with this theory. Or with this theorem. It's going to look complicated, but I promise you it's not. And if you were with me for when we did chemistry last year in Physical World, it's somewhat like that. In that it's some people it clicks immediately and you're like, oh yeah, I get it, and it's easy. And some people are left frustrated. But I promise, if you're left frustrated, eventually it clicks and you're like, oh, yeah, this is really easy. It just took me a little bit. I'm the one that always got frustrated and took a little longer. So if you're in that boat too, you'll have to believe me that it does click. And when it does, you're like, oh, I got it. This really isn't that bad. I just kind of had to do it. And it's the same. It's literally the same thing every time when we do this. So if you follow the pattern, you can't mess it up. It's pretty straightforward. So what we're doing kind of is counting alleles. Do you remember what alleles are? Yeah, capital letters, lowercase letters. Those are alleles, these things, right, with cats. So this would be, if you remember, just to get our terms correct again, how would you describe capital B, capital B? Homozygous, heterozygous? All right. Homozygous dominant. This one would be? And? Okay. Yeah, just heterozygous for this one, and then homozygous recessive. Okay. So what we're going to do with this information is, and I apologize for this because this is the one like PowerPoint presentation where you couldn't make stuff capital and lowercase, but so it looks weird as it pops up here. But assume that there are two alleles, right? Capital B and small b, because I can't use lowercase b because it doesn't show up in this PowerPoint. So assume that there are two alleles, capital B, little b. With me so far? Right, so let's say capital B represents whatever color that is, gray or black, and little b represents the white color. So capital B is dominant, the black one's dominant. The other one is, why is this not following me anymore? Can you see me? Oh well. Well, best of luck. Yeah. Okay, so if that's true, if we've got capital B and lowercase b in a population, right, and that's all there is, like the only two options for hair color are black or white, would you agree that if we added up, and it has to be this way, that if we added stuff up, we're going to, I said we're going to have to add here, that the dominant allele, we don't have to write anything down here, but that the dominant allele is going to equal, you know how in like algebra or whatever you use letters to represent numbers? The letter we're going to use to represent the number of dominant alleles is going to be P. That's going to be consistent the whole time, and that's never going to change. The letter that we are going to use to represent the number of recessive alleles is going to be Q. Those are never going to change. Period, point blank. When you add those up, would you agree, if we say, like, in all the cat population in all the world, that when you added up the percentage of people that have a dominant allele and the percentage of people that have a recessive allele, you should always get 100%. Because you can't have anything other than the dominant or the recessive. Right? Like, if you added all this up, if you added all the capital B's up, which is up 50%, right? And you added all the lowercase b's up, 50%, they would equal 100% of the population. What if you did this? What if you had something like a population of 3 individuals, and the 3 or 4 individuals, first individual was capital B, second individual was capital B, third individual was capital B, and the fourth individual was lowercase b. So here's our 4 people. Would you agree that of these 4 people, when you added up all their alleles, you still have to get 100%? It's just that most of the alleles now are capital B, and fewer of them are lowercase b, but you're still going to get 100%. You with me? And that's that's a point of confusion that always comes up. But P plus Q always has to equal 100%. That's just a fact, because that's all that's present. Even if this last 2 were capital B, would P plus Q still equal 100%? Yeah, because it'd be 100% plus 0, right? Yep, exactly. But 100% plus 0 is 100%. Or if it were 50-50 or 60-40, it's always going to be 100%. So that's the first thing you absolutely have to know about this, is that they must add up to 100%. And part of the formula we're going to use is that P plus Q is equal to 100%. Or, how do you represent 100% just as a regular number? 1. Right? So P plus Q, if you're doing it in percentage, it's going to equal 100%. If you're doing it with decimal numbers, P plus Q is always going to equal 1. So far okay? All right. So that's the first part of this. And the second part of this deals with homozygous dominant, heterozygous, homozygous recessive. So there's 2 parts of this formula. The first part we got there. The next part of it we're going to use the same letters here, but if we're going to count individuals, here's how we do it. If they're homozygous dominant, the way you keep track of homozygous dominant, that means 2 capital letters, right? So P represents capital letters, so to be homozygous dominant, that's going to equal P squared, because it's 2 capital letters. Make sense? Okay. So this is just the letter we're going to use to represent the number of people that are homozygous dominant. That's it. That's all P squared represents. It's P squared because they are capital. If we're going to do the homozygous recessive ones, that's going to be Q squared. So Q squared is the people that are homozygous recessive. And then the people, or individuals, or animals, or whatever, that are heterozygous are 2PQ. Those are the variables we use. So those are never going to change. Those numbers and letters never change. Everything's always the same that way. I promise you that will never change. And it looks complicated right now because we've got a bunch of letters and squared stuff up here. But I promise it really is not. It is. It clicks for some people right away. It doesn't, and that's fine if it doesn't. Would you agree, though, that if we add all these up, because your only options in life for discrete traits are to be homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, or heterozygous, right? Those are the only things you can be if you've got a discrete trait. If we added all those up, what percent should we get? Should get 100% or 1, right? So those are the 2 formulas we're going to use are going to be right here. We're going to always remember that P plus Q equals 1 and that P squared plus Q squared plus 2PQ equals 1. That's all you have to do. That's all you got to remember for these. Doing okay? Okay. Oh, sorry. I'll leave it there. Is that all right like that?